you're happy for us to carry on recording. I know quite a lot of you on tonight, but for those of you that don't know me, my name's Judith Mcdonald. I'm the branch chair for the North of Scotland and Islands, and I'm delighted to see you here tonight. Before we begin our session, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of the next couple of events we've got coming up. Next Wednesday, 31st of March, we've got our monthly coffee morning. That's at 11:15 in the morning. Tuesday, the 6th of April at 7 p.m. is book group. And Wednesday, still haven't started, Abby, you'll not be surprised to know. And Wednesday, 21st of April, we've got working in HR in the civil service. So that's the next few events that are coming up. This session tonight, though, I'm delighted to welcome two speakers from the Institute of Occupational Medicine. Firstly, we have Alice Davis, who's a research psychologist in occupational psychology, and Michelle Reid, who is People and Operations Director. The Institute of Occupational Medicine is a major independent centre for scientific excellence in the fields of occupational and environmental health, hygiene and safety. Their core purpose is to improve people's health and safety at work, at home and in the environment through excellent independent science to create a healthy and sustainable world. As a not-for-profit organisation, their main aims are to create and advance knowledge through scientific research and analysis, apply this knowledge to support policy and practice development, science into practice for their clients, use their knowledge and expertise to develop and deliver consultancy services into the marketplace, develop and retain capability, so that's people, knowledge, profile and technology, ensuring future growth and sustainability, and raise levels of awareness and understanding of current and emerging health, safety and well-being issues with government, industry and the general public. So in tonight's session, Alice and Michelle will look at how to manage technology and the impact of work-life balance. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end if you have any, so pop them into the chat box and we can pick them up from there. But without further ado, Alice and Michelle, I'll hand over to you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Judith. And that's the first few slides of the presentation done because you've stolen our thunder. So that's great. Thanks very much for that. No, I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. It's fine. That was a lovely introduction. So thank you very much for that. So as Judith has said, I'm Michelle Reid. I'm the People and Operations Director for the Institute of Occupational Medicine, and I've been there for 3-4 years. I've lost a year obviously because of the pandemic. Alice, we're very, very lucky as an organisation to have someone such as Alice on our payroll actually, who very much is our in-house psychologist or research psychologist, and works very much as my right-hand woman when I'm trying to do things in the organisation from a people well-being and transformational change perspective. So that was who we are. So can I just check, can everybody see my screen okay? So are you actually seeing the presentation? Great.
Yeah.
So so Judith, you gave that lovely introduction to us, and obviously it wouldn't be a session such as this if there wasn't a shameless plug of the organisation. So that was lovely what you did for us. We are a very interesting organisation in that we take problems in the world and we apply our scientific knowledge and we help solve them, and then we have our consultancy side of the organisation that actually goes out to other businesses and helps them put those solutions in. So we are forever horizon scanning and working with governments, with other big institutions, and applying our scientific knowledge, particularly in relation to people, health, safety, well-being, and also in terms of the environment as well. So a very interesting organisation to have joined for myself anyway. And we are for good, and in the corporate world, as Judith has said, we're not for profit. So we work very hard to make sure that everything that we do earn from our consultancy work is ploughed back into the research that we're doing that's coming down the track as well. So we have charitable aims there that are really about carrying out that research and providing that solution, and then publishing and communicating that. So, you know, we're not about looking at things and having solutions and then completely monetizing them and not doing anything with them. You know, a lot of what we do is about sharing, it's about collaborating, it's about working with others to make sure that there's solutions out there to help all businesses and basically help our world for the future. We also like to lead the advancement of education in the fields that we are specialists in, and we provide independent advice and guidance. And over the last 50 years that we've been in business, our core purpose and our charitable aims and our desire to improve the world in which we live and work has established us in a unique position where we are absolutely trusted, and that we have maintained that consistent and integral approach as well. So in our work, we do, from a high level simple perspective, we look to understand and mitigate risks to health in the workplace, the effect of health on work, and also risks to health in the environment. So that they're kind of all coupled together there. And as we said earlier on, the key purpose there is to ensure people's workplace safety through scientific expertise as well. And in terms of our core business areas, so how we then take those that research that we have done over the years and that we continue to do today, we then have our consultancy businesses that enables us to really help businesses to do that as well. So whether it's to remain compliant, to check compliance, to support better working environments, to investigate where they can improve the workplace for their people. So we have a laboratory on site, so we look at chemistry and mineralogy analysis. We do research, as we've talked about already. We also have a training function, so we will actually go into organisations and provide training in particular areas. But also we deliver off-the-shelf training for people to come as well, so public courses at the same time. We also have an expert witness area, and we also have a workplace protection team, and that is primarily looking at occupational hygiene, healthcare, ventilation services as well. And as you can imagine, we've been exceptionally busy through the pandemic, where we've been able to utilise our expertise in the fight against COVID as well. So we've worked very closely with the NHS and within governments as well to apply that expertise. So Alice, over to you now then.
Thank you very much, Michelle. So tonight here we are talking to you about technology in the workplace, wherever that workplace may be at the moment. And the key question for businesses to consider is, are your people always on? Do you notice these behaviours in people have always been on? And do you hear any comments from people about this? So particularly with the impact of COVID-19 and the current lockdown restrictions, the lines of work and life have been blurred even more so than they ever have been before. And it's been increased by the pandemic, but it's not something new from the pandemic, having this blur between work and life. We had issues with work-life balance before, and the impacts of this. It's got worse during the pandemic, and it's thinking about how we can try and improve this moving forward and how we manage this for individuals. So everything that we're going to say tonight is true for those that are working at home at the moment. It's true for agile workers, mobile workers, remote workers, and anybody really that uses technology as part of their work. So if we start off with a few statistics, so there's various surveys that you may be aware of that have been happening recently, but we'll start off with some from the Office for National Statistics. So before COVID, 5% of workers mainly worked from home, with 1/3 of people working remotely all or some of the time, which is actually about 10 million people. So we're talking about a lot of people here. And when the lockdown hit last April, 46% of all workers did some form of work from home, with 86% of these doing so as a result of COVID, and around 30% of people saying that they worked more hours than usual when they're working at home. So this is really blurring those lines between work and life. And then thinking about the future and a time after COVID, it's been reported that 81% expect to work from home at least one day a week. So working from home rather than in the office. And some research by CIPD found that 70% of employers are now saying that they will expand or introduce more working from home in the future. And this is compared to 45% pre-COVID. So the numbers are increasing in terms of those that will be working from home. And you just need to see in the news, there's some companies that are already saying they're closing their offices and all people will be working from home. In fact, just not long before this session started, there was a segment on BBC News exactly about this and how we're going to have this kind of hybrid between working at home and working in the office. So if we now move on to some work that's been done by CIPD. So if you've not looked at this report, which is a screenshot of the front page on this slide, if you've not looked at the reports, I really recommend it. I think it's a brilliant report with lots of useful findings in there. So just to look at a few of the key highlights from the report and some topics of the lessons learned, I'll just mention a couple that are on this spider diagram. So if we look at productivity, it's been reported that there's an increase among home workers in terms of their productivity. But when looking at this in further detail, there's actually a lot of work intensification, people working longer hours, as I've mentioned on the previous slide, and also people now not having that commute. So you don't have that physical change from working in the office to then going home. So you might think, oh, well, I don't have that commute, so I'll just sit and do some more work on the laptop before I go through to the other room for dinner. Distractions, it depends on everybody's circumstances at home. You could find that you have increased distractions whilst working at home, or you could find that you've got decreased distractions. And especially when schools and nurseries are closed, there would have been a lot more distractions at home, a lot more challenges.
Or in Judith's case, our husband, mine, my 18-year-old daughter, or puppies, or whatever. So we even heard some of them at the beginning. You know, distractions are something that we need to live with, but the lack of distractions can actually be really damaging as well, and it can exacerbate loneliness and isolation.
Exactly. And the whole isolation piece, it can depend on people's personality and lifestyle and what their preferences are. And then the final one that I'll just touch upon from this spider diagram is around work-life boundaries. So having a focus on work-life boundaries is helpful, and it's not just for those that are working from home. Even people that are going on site or into an office, there's still that work-life boundary. And with technology, people more and more are taking work home anyway. So it's not just those that are working at home all the time. So continuing with the CIPD research report, so 3 main recommendations came from the report in relation to what should be considered. So the first of these was being aware of the difference between standard working at home and that COVID enforced working at home. So we saw some really specific challenges in the COVID enforced working at home that happened during that first lockdown last year. So there was poor planning because there was a lack of time, and it wasn't there wasn't a choice there. It was total home working. So even if people worked from home prior to the lockdown, they were then going to that 5 days from working at home. In some instances, the technology wasn't appropriate or set up enough. So there are changes in relation to what COVID has done to home working, but we need to try and learn the lessons from that, but also keep in mind that home working in the future may represent more of the home working that happened before COVID. And so we've maybe learned from some of those challenges as organisations, and can build on any opportunities that have been presented. The second recommendation was about home working being here to stay. So making sure that working practices are designed to suit all locations. So if we do move to more of a hybrid model with work and home being options for doing work, then making sure that it suits those that are on site, but also those that are working at home. So, for example, having technology around knowledge sharing, coordination of work, task-related communications, and then this can encourage and increase performance and innovation as well. And then the final recommendation is to concentrate on partial voluntary home working as part of designing high-quality jobs. So having that appropriate balance of home and office work depends on the type of work that's being done, it depends on the processes for teams that are in place, and it really does depend on the individual and what works for them. So it's really important to work with those individuals to see what their preferences are moving forward.
Now, if you thought that you were coming to join us tonight and you were just going to listen to us do all the chat, then I'm sorry, but that is not how it's going to be. And we've tried to do a little bit of interaction. So have you all got either your smartphone or your device there that you can access menti.com? If you can just either give me a thumbs up or let me know that that's okay, because we have a poll that we would like you to do. So we're very interested to hear from you as to how your work-life balance actually is right now. And we would encourage you to be very honest. So if you go to www.menti.com and use the code 71116501 and answer the question using the options that are there. So very interesting. So there's 4 of you so far that have responded. Biggest percentage there being can't complain. Oh, there's someone there that is probably being more truthful than others possibly. So yeah, quite interesting. Great. So you can see there's a real mix. So someone there who has amazing work-life balance, and I'm really, really pleased to hear that actually, and it would be lovely, whoever that is, to not necessarily let everybody know, but if there's any lessons that you've got to share, then please feel free to do that. Quite a few people saying can't complain, it could be worse, but that also means that it could be better. And a couple there around what work-life balance, all I do is work. Now, I probably empathise with that as well, and the fact that there's no life to have right now. So, so a real kind of mixed bag of results. And what I guess what we would say here is, if this is how you guys are all feeling, and it's kind of a mixed bag. Some of you at the good end, some at the kind of there is nothing. Can you imagine how your people are actually feeling right now? And part of our role as HR professionals and people working in organisations, looking after people, is what are we doing for them, and actually what sort of things should we be thinking about? Because if this is how we are, this is how we are feeling, this is how we've been affected by working at home, or the pandemic that's there, or even pre-pandemic, because none of this has come about because of the pandemic. This has been exacerbated, but this has been going on for a long time. The reality is that your people will feel the same, and it's really about acknowledging that fact as well. How you feel is not in isolation. It'll be the same for your workforce as well. So thank you very much for that. We'll come back to Mentimeter in a little while. So let me just stop that. And go back to our slides. So, okay, Alice, over to you again.
Okay, thank you. I have a little double act going on here. So work-life balance, there's so many different terms that get used for work-life balance. So we've got a few examples here. So conflict, integration, blend, harmony, and they all show that there is this continuum and this shifting boundary between different areas of our lives. And in some cases, that boundary can become so blurred that it actually disappears. And this can be really dangerous for as a threat to mental health. So research suggests that workers may be more likely to interrupt their work activities to deal with home demands during the day when they're working at home. And then again, after hours, then it's more likely that they're then going to interrupt their home life with their work demands. So there is a real issue here about how to try and manage this, and how to manage the technology which is present, and the work technology that is present in our home lives now. So many of your employees may work in setups that look like some of these pictures on the screen. So it may be really difficult for them to separate work from life. They may be sitting in postures, in chairs that aren't really designed for sitting in for a long time. And these are all issues that can build up over time. If people are sitting in uncomfortable positions, then they may get some like back pain and things like that. So it's all something that we need to think about when people are working at home, and about whether or not their setup is ideal and suitable for them. So in a survey of UK home workers during the first lockdown, so last year, 50% said they were unhappy with their work-life balance. And just this week on the BBC News website, I don't know if anybody else saw, but there were some articles associated with Goldman Sachs and the boss saying that go the extra mile despite workers already working a 95-hour week. And if you work in a 95-hour week, then you're not going to have much of a work-life balance. And then in a recent survey that was published by the Harvard Business Review, nearly 90% of workers said that their work-life balance was getting worse. So there's a real issue out there, and something that needs to be done.
And I think the interesting thing about work-life balance is that there is no one size fits all.
Mm.
What makes this a wonderful world is that everybody's unique, everybody has their own needs and wants, and if anybody is looking for a silver bullet, then I'm really sorry, because we're not going to be able to give it to you. But what we can do is let you know that you're not alone, and there are lots of different things that you can do in your organisation and also with yourself and your workforce to actually enable people to make the right choices for themselves, because there is a real thing here in terms of human behaviour and choice, and we'll talk more about that in a second. So yeah.
I just follow on from what Michelle said there as well about it being about individuals, and there needs to be that flexibility in relation to work-life balance. If somebody has a certain way of managing their work-life balance one day or 1 week or 1 month, it won't necessarily be the same for them that following day, week or month, because it can depend what they have on at work, it can depend what they have on at home. So it really does change. So there needs to be those options and choices available for people. So if we think about technology, which is wonderful when it works, do you recognise yourself in either of these pictures? So on the left, we have that the individual is in control of their device, they manage it in a way that is helpful for them, whereas on the right, it is the technology that is distracting the individual in trying to get their attention through, it might be notifications, buzzing, lighting up, and the individual just constantly responding to that technology and not being able to switch off from it. So,
No, I was just going to say, I'm sure, I know not a lot of people have got their cameras on, but I'm quite sure there's people kind of sitting there nodding their head, or even having their device beside them with notifications coming on, or things popping through and getting distracted. And I think this challenge with who's in control has been around for a long time, and it's certainly crept up. I mean, I have an 18-year-old daughter. I've got a husband who's a little bit older than me. I've also got my father, and I was at their house tonight, at my father's house tonight, because I'm his carer, so we look after him. And there I was round there, we were having dinner, he's on his phone, my husband's on his phone, my daughter's on her phone, and I'm kind of sitting there going, conversation dead then. And it's that pool of whatever device that it is that keeps you kind of hooked in as well. So it's certainly something that has got worse and worse over time, I would say.
Mm-hmm. A survey that was done recently by the Happy Company found that 8 in 10 people have found it difficult to switch off in the last 12 months, which I can certainly agree with at times as well. So in life, we've fallen into a bit of a trap of our environment and our need to stay connected, which overpowers our ability to then control our lives. So if we think about the effects of technology on your people, so in the workplace, so it can be great. Technology can be really useful for business and for individuals. You just need to think about the flexibility that it offers, the automation, increased collaboration, brings people together, connects people all over the world across different time zones, and it can improve productivity and profitability. But there is this real dark side to it and this negativity, which can be really dangerous and can have an adverse effect. So if it's not managed, so it can increase stress, people can feel like there's this big brother watching them, lack of human interaction, resistance to change, reduced productivity, just to name a few. There's lots of different effects to it, but that's just a few examples there.
So going back to Menti then, we have another question for you, and this is going to be one that's going to get you thinking. So the if you go back to Mentimeter, you will see that we have another question there, and it's really about what do we do for our people to help them maximize their work-life blend through the technology. So do we actually provide guidance to people with the technology that they're given at work? So what's really interesting here is that actually we've got a good proportion of us that are actually saying absolutely, of course, and I think that is absolutely to be commended, because what we do find, and you'll see there's over 50% of us that are kind of never really thought about it, actually not really sure, need to kind of check that out. And I think what I would say is, if in your organisation people need to use equipment, so for example a baler, a compactor, if they are issued a company car, for example, we wouldn't dream of handing it over without making sure that they were competent. We wouldn't give someone a company car without checking their driving licence and if they're fit to drive, all of that sort of thing. But typically what happens when it comes to devices such as laptops, smart devices, mobile phones, we don't necessarily give people guidance on how to use it. And I'm not necessarily saying about how to answer calls, send messages, but actually around notifications and when it should be on, when it's off, what's right, what's okay, what kind of framework they can work in, what choices they can make, and actually what are the best ways to utilise it to manage their workload. And it is something that, I mean, certainly I can talk about the IOM, you know, not until very recently where we've really digitalised, and it was the beginning of the pandemic actually, we realised how little we educated people in our devices. And, you know, given some of the research we do, you know, in some cases our house was not in order either. But now we've been running a lot of things to kind of help people understand how to kind of minimise some of the distractions technology can give, but also how they can manage it to maximise their work, but enable them to have some blend as well. So thank you very much for that. That's been great. I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat because there's been a couple of things come in. So, so Abby, you're saying you personally ensure that you have a work-life balance, but you could work round the clock. I think I would absolutely agree with that as well. Judith, you said a friend of yours says he doesn't feel he's working at home but living at work. Do you know what? Absolutely empathise with that as well. I mean, I said earlier on, I'm working out my kitchen, so literally I'm getting up in the morning, coming down to my kitchen. I'm in my kitchen all day, only leaving really to go to the loo or check on my husband and my daughter and make sure that they've eaten because I'm taking up the space. Then I'm cooking and cleaning in the kitchen, and then by that time it's bedtime. So, you know, essentially you're kind of living and working in the same space. And Abby, you were asking if these workers were across all sectors and industries. So yes, it was. It's a general thing as well. And I think you're absolutely right. People don't necessarily use the guidance, and there's the old adage there around, you can take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But the reality is we still need to take the horse to water. And in a lot of cases, you know, there are businesses that don't do that. And it's just an oversight. It's not a deliberate case at all, but it's definitely one to think about as well. And Hazel, you're right. So saying I think we assume everyone has a certain level of competence. Absolutely great point. So just because people have a phone in their home life, or they maybe have a smart device, we assume they've got a level of competence. And actually, we absolutely are adding to stress levels if we provide no support in IT, because, you know, people's technology competence varies from person to person. I mean, I would personally say my daughter is a tech guru, but actually she's a tech guru in her iPhone. You know, if I sit her down in front of my laptop, she was doing some research for an apprenticeship, she didn't know how to work it, because that's not what she's kind of been used to using. And, you know, ultimately my dad, for example, is great with his own laptop, but, you know, give him my daughter's iPhone and he's like, what's all this all about? So, you know, the people's competence is very different, particularly if they're used to a different version or whatever that may be as well. So giving some kind of guidance is really key. And Daly, you said such a good idea for shaping the culture of work-life balance and tackling some of those presenteeism issues through better setting user guides. And I think, you know, Alice, I'll give you some of the practical things very, very shortly. But everything that we are talking about tonight doesn't cost money. It's simple. It's stuff that you can do for yourself and you can take back to your organisations as well, and just get you to start thinking about what you can do for yourselves and for your organisation. So thank you very much, everyone, for that. Keep adding any questions or comments onto the chat. We would love to hear them And what you'll see here, just to oh, Abby, I've just seen your chat. Have others' absence rate changed during the last year? Mine has dropped like a stone. It's dropped like a stone. And we didn't have a high absence level anyway, but we have had very, very little, which is quite interesting. And I think that does play into the presenteeism thing. And again, you know, as Alice said earlier on, technology has the good side, the light side and the dark side. And presenteeism has that as well. You know, people are working from home and they don't feel well enough to come in, but they feel well enough to get on with some stuff. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do think there's something wrong if people are kind of really, really not well and they need to be off. They feel they have to slave themselves away because they're not then helping themselves either. So it's a kind of catch-22, and that's where conversations and real great leadership can kind of come in with people as well, so they understand the expectations and they have an environment where they can talk to their managers and their people. So sorry, on a tangent, but very good points that there are as well. What we have here next is actually some of the device settings. So whilst we've put this as an iPhone, these settings are available elsewhere, and Alice is going to talk us through some of those and some of the benefits that they can give as well. Alice, I'll back to you.
Thank you, Michelle. So yeah, there's just a few examples here with the screenshot, as Michelle said, from an iPhone, but available on other devices and applicable as well to laptops and things like that. So if you look at notifications, being able to tailor these to whether or not you want them to come on or how distracting they are, or whether or not you have them on for certain applications but not others, to then having things like the do not disturb function, so reducing all distractions coming through. Then thinking about the nighttime mode, so on the mobile phones you can have this setting that many of you may use already, where it will then stop the notifications from coming in at a certain time. It will reduce the brightness of the screen to reduce that light before bed, which can be useful for sleep hygiene. And then really interesting is the screen time insights that you can get on the phone, which can sometimes be quite scary when you then look on and see, oh, did I really spend that much time on that app? Which can be quite scary to look at, but it's simple tips like this, where if you don't know that they exist as settings, then you don't know to go on them. So when someone says, oh, here's an iPhone, for example, there's no instruction manual, it's intuitive. Well, that's great. But if you don't know that something's there, then you don't know that it's an option.
And I think that, you know, Alice said at the beginning there, the notifications, you can tailor your notifications by app. So if you want to see notifications for one particular application that you have, then you can tailor that. It's exactly the same in your laptop. You know, how many of your people know that they can manage the email notification pop-up or the little envelope that sits in the bottom corner? You know, you can switch all of them on and off. You know, you can, a lot of the devices you can set away modes or do not disturb or otherwise. And it's just amazing some of the things that you can do to really help yourself to not be governed by the device, whichever one that it may be.
Yeah. So now if we talk about a piece of IWEM research that we did, this was a couple of years ago now, but it's still relevant to COVID. This was done in COVID time, sorry. This was done in collaboration with Birkbeck University of London. So we were looking at the paradox of smart technology and the management of work-life boundaries. So by paradox, we were talking about how the same device can be helpful sometimes and unhelpful at other times, or also at the same time. So we specifically looked at smartphones, but many of the principles and results are relevant to laptops. And as I say, it's relevant to kind of pre-COVID times, COVID times, and will be relevant moving forward in relation to work-life balance. And overall, the results showed that whilst some practices are seen as primarily being helpful, such as how accessible the devices make it, you can work anywhere and any time, there's also that underlying negative of the unhelpful component, so kind of that compulsive monitoring of emails. And so this highlighted that paradox between the two. And also a really important point that we found was in relation to it's an individual's preference, and that preference can change depending on the day, week, month, as we've highlighted earlier. So if I just talk you through some of the main themes that we found. So if we start with what was helpful about the technology in managing work-life balance. We've got on the left-hand side here, the accessibility and connectivity were seen to be helpful. The increased efficiency prevented that unexpected when people went into work the next morning. So people found it helpful to check their emails at night time or early morning before going in and starting that working day. And having that ability to work anywhere and anytime was really appreciated by people, as it offered them that flexibility, which ultimately has been really useful this year as well. So if we move over to the right hand side to the customization of the tool. So by tool here, we're talking about a smartphone, but it could also be relevant to laptops. So people found it really helpful to be able to control it in relation to communication, notifications, and thinking about things on a laptop, like Michelle's just mentioned, you know, with Outlook, being able to tailor those notifications that pop up on screen, or with Zoom or Teams. And on a couple of occasions, respondents identified that learning from each other was really important for them, learning about new functionalities and customization tips. Which raises the question, and such an important question, of whose responsibility is it to ensure that an individual is equipped to use the work technology in a way that is helpful for them. So knowing how to use it in a way that is helpful and how to manage it in a way that is helpful for them.
And I think the other thing there, you know, people, there's a lot in the press and in research just now about people craving the connection with their co-workers, and actually craving that meaningfulness in their role as well, and learning from each other is a key social trait that people really want at work. So encouraging people to share their stories, and if you've got people who have a fantastic work-life balance, so whoever it was that answered that question, you know, I'd absolutely be encouraging you to share those stories with others, because you know, we would, you know, share those lessons, you know, and hear from others where they are maybe struggling, and actually be able to utilize that connection to help them and to coach them out of some of the bad behaviors as well. And you know, people can't see the wood from the trees sometimes as well, so just reaching out to colleagues and sharing some of that can be really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm. So some of the unhelpful themes, so on the left here we've got the compulsive monitoring of emails, and people spoke about this in the interviews as being like habitual behaviour. They needed to wean themselves off it. Really kind of emotive and strong language was used, and also as has been mentioned already about this digital presenteeism that the technology was kind of reinforcing, and again relevant to smartphones but also laptops, when people might be tempted, if all of their work tech is in front of them when they're at home now, when we're working at home more, then it's even more tempting to just have a quick look at that email, see what's coming in. And the expectation of others was a really strong theme in the results, with expectations of others really resulting in that work intensification, and at times that self-imposed expectation as well, feeling like they need to meet the demands of others. And this could be work, there were kind of examples around working late at night. So an email would come in on an email thread with other people. You maybe see it and think, oh, I'll respond to it tomorrow, I won't think about it now. But then somebody else on the email thread would respond, and then you don't want to be the one that doesn't respond. And then it just feeds into this whole cycle of all of you then working late at night, which is just, it's not good, because it puts that expectation onto others. And we'll talk a little bit in a few slides time about how to try and manage that. So the quotes here from this research were funded by another study that we completed at IOM. This one was through our Singapore office, and the survey went out to the general population. So out of nearly 1,000 respondents, we found that there was a real difference between if someone chose to work after hours using their technology, then it was seen as positive. But if there was that expectation, then it completely switched and it became this negative experience. So whilst it could be doing the same work task, the choice or expectation makes that big difference.
And I think that's a really, really important point, because certainly what we are finding in IOM, so we ran a survey with our employees at the beginning of the first lockdown, and we're currently running it again just now, and overwhelmingly our people want the choice. They want the choice to whether work in the office, work at home. They want a choice of devices and setups that they actually have. They want to be able to have that choice so they can be flexible, it can work in with home life, whatever that may be. But having the choice taken away from them has really taken its toll on some. And it's not because of anything I guess, negative from a business perspective. We're not expecting them to work any longer or anything like that. It's the fact that their choices have been taken away from them in life that is a real teller. And Abby's put a really interesting thing in the chat box here, Alice, where she's saying she remembers a point in a smart working course about when did it become okay to congratulate each other for being totally overworked instead of cheering about good work-life balance. And it's absolutely right. It is a habitual behaviour that we need to get out of now. So, you know, when we were in offices, if you were the first one in and the last one out, you were seen to be a superstar. That's not true in any sense of the word at all. You should be defined by your outputs and your contribution, not the number of hours that you're actually physically working. And we all have that duty to be looking out for our own people, but helping them to make the right choices, but in a way where they have control over it. So, you know, there are lots of things out there where businesses have imposed particular times. They've taken away people's ability to sign on at particular times. And whilst there are some real merits to some of that, actually, if I look at my own case, I love working at night because I'm on my own a lot. My husband and my daughter work at 3 o'clock in the morning. They do online pickings. I'm sitting alone and I think a lot and I do a lot of reflection. So having the ability, the choice to go onto my laptop, to maybe read a report, to maybe going through some emails, whatever it is, it's my choice. I choose to do it whether I don't. And if that was taken away from me, I really wouldn't like that. But equally, if I was forced to do that, so if I was up against it and there was a real issue and I was working, I would actually be really bitter about that. So choice is a really big thing for people, but it's educating people on what choices are there and what the expectations are. And I know you're talking a little bit about expectations there as well, Alice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we move through to the next slide. Thank you, Michelle. So this is also from the IWEM research. So there were kind of some main ideas that came from all of this. So really thinking about employees as being active agents. People aren't passive with their technology. They have an active role, and it's about them actively using it in a way that is helpful for them, which can also influence on their productivity and colleague productivity as well. And again, we've just mentioned there the options and choices and how important these are. And not just about having those options and choices, but promoting those, letting people know what the options and choices are. Because if they don't know what they are, then they don't know what it is that they can choose from. And in relation to autonomy, people having that autonomy and that control to make their own choices once they know what they are, and knowing that they can weave their own path for what works for their work-life balance, and that this can change, and it's not something that's static and going to stay the same. And then we've touched upon the learning as well. So it's really important to learn from each other, but also to learn from the organisation. There was some really interesting research that was done just a few years ago, and they found that over half of organisations, so it's 57%, don't provide any guidance or training on using technology for work and how that works with work-life balance. So there is a real gap there for providing some level of guidance for people to use. So if we provide some tips. So this is in relation to employee routines. So thinking about whilst working at home, but it'll also be relevant moving forward for kind of hybrid working as well. So thinking about that transition where we'd previously had maybe a physical commute and that kind of marked the start of the day and the end of the day, trying to encourage employees to have some form of transition in the morning. If they can't manage to get out for a walk around the block, then maybe just having that conscious moment of when I turn on my laptop in the morning, that is my work day starting. Or it could be that they have an alarm for the start of the day and then for the end of the day, to try and build that boundary and that barrier if that's what works for them. And then the importance of taking breaks throughout the day, both for physical and mental health, and making sure that they get away from the technology. It is far too easy these days to have video call after video call after video call, and before you know it, you've had like 3 back-to-back meetings, all staring at the same screen, no time in between to pop for a glass of water and to get up from your desk. It really does feel like that intensification of meetings.
And I think I would add to that as well. So I mean, even when people were in the office, they spent a lot of time at their desk and even at lunch breaks looking at their laptop, but they might have been on Facebook, or they might have been, you know, online shopping or whatever it may be. in this scenario where we've got at the moment, where you are completely at home and you're on your technology all the time, if you don't want to go away from your laptop or your PC or whatever it is that you're working on, that's okay, but do something different in break time. You know, maybe have a coffee or have lunch with a colleague and connect on a different level with someone. You know, maybe even have, if you've got a friend in another workplace and they're kind of struggling a little bit, you know, arrange a lunch date, if you like, and actually have that, you know, away from work conversation or activity, and just something that kind of breaks up the day and takes a bit of the focus away and lets you rest and recharge over your lunch break.
Yeah, definitely. And this next one about separate spaces, it really depends on the space that people have at home for working, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there needs to be a completely different space, but try and encourage employees to have something different about the time that they're doing their work. So if it's that they use a different notepad when they're doing their work notes compared to when they're doing their shopping list, something that identifies this is different time, whether it's a different coffee mug or something, because we appreciate that not everybody has a separate room where they can work from home. And so it's about trying to have something that is different about that time. And then if people are working on their work technology in the evening, just letting them know if you're working on that technology, then that's okay, but maybe a reminder to close down the apps, turn off the notifications, to try and stop work from distracting them whilst they're doing maybe online shopping or something like that. And then that importance of taking lunch breaks is really important, just to have that time. And like Michelle says, it doesn't need to be necessarily away from the technology, but doing something different on the technology. There was a survey recently that found that over 50% of people who are working at home don't take a lunch break. So it's definitely something that people need to think about.
We've got a couple of things in the chat box here that are really good, actually. So we've got Mofa here has said, I hope I have pronounced your name right, but I think we need to go back to working smart rather than working hard. And I've kind of responded saying absolutely, but it does go further than that. It's really about working hard on the right things, feeling that you've positively contributed and that you have meaning in your role and you feel valued. And that's where, you know, communication and connection is really, really important. And Abby has said we need to be careful that we don't just extend the time we have to have meetings into the time that we used to commute. You know, the commute was exactly that. And, you know, I used to work in years ago, I used to work in the Borders, and I used to love the commute because I was flowing the other way from the traffic. So I was kind of winding myself up into work, and then I was winding myself down, and I really enjoyed that commute. But, you know, working from home, you can actually substitute that time. So that's quite a good point and one to be thinking about. And Daly's really enjoyed loved the transition points, some super helpful transitions. Hazel, you're saying that you and your team have a video call every morning before a coffee break, and we sometimes chat about work, sometimes about non-work, but we're still connecting socially, and this has become very important to us. And it's a great point because at IOM we actually have drop-in coffee sessions that we run. So we open up a Zoom call for 2 hours and we invite people to drop in, whether it be for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, however long. There's no agenda. The main thing being that we are all there just to connect, and it's really encouraged people to connect with others that they might not have seen. So what we've seen is there's been a positive increase in connection with people in their teams or people they're working with closely, because they've been very purposeful in their meetings or their times that they're having with them. So they're probably talking more purposefully now than they maybe were before, but actually they have less connection with others they might have seen in the corridor or at the water cooler or at the coffee machine, and they're missing that. So having something like that and having that morning video calls a really, really good one. Abby's head of ICT laughs at her for being so retro. Love that, because she shuts her laptop down because work is done. And you need to go back to your ICT guy and go, the laugh's on you, pal, because actually that is exactly what we need. And that's my transition from work into the evening. Absolutely love that. And Judith has the same with the branch coffee morning. So no agenda, just mostly chat. It's just that craving of human connection. And that's where the light side of technology could really work. I would have really suffered in the pandemic if we didn't have video technology, because that's my human connection that I would really miss from work. So thanks for that, guys. Keep them coming as we're going through. Alice has got some more tips coming up for you now as well.
I do. So this slide is focusing on tips for communication. I'm sure I don't need to sit here and say that communication is key, because we all know that, whether that's in work or in life. So it can be really helpful for your employees, thinking about how they might communicate their working hours to others, because this can create that shared expectation and place that boundary on their working hours. So examples of this could be using things like the email signature. So just having a line in there saying, these are my working days, my working hours, or it could be an out of office message. So that could be internal and or external, having the same sort of idea, or really encouraging people to use the status options. So in Zoom or Teams, using that status too, whether you're available, away, or also there's do not disturb on there. So that could be a useful one for setting expectations that I'm busy doing a focused task. I'm not going to respond to emails at the moment, but people will know that they'll respond when they can after that. And we've just touched upon it there, but really encouraging communication and connection between employees, and recognizing that different employees prefer different routes for that. Not everybody likes to be on a video Zoom. Some people prefer phones, some people prefer like the instant messenger type thing. So really encouraging people to find ways that work for them and to do different things as appropriate and what works.
The interesting thing just now is, I don't know if you've had yours yet, Alice, but we've got a new CEO starting, and he's a current employee with us, so we all know him. But what he's been doing for the last 2 weeks is that actually he's been calling people on the telephone. Shock. But he's been doing it. When he's been doing it, he's actually been going outside and walking and talking. So he's actually varying what he's doing, and he's spending a bit of time away from a laptop. He's kind of, it's really kind of helped him in that sense as well. So just thinking about, you know, some of the retro stuff, Abby, you know, actually going outside on your phone and having a walking meeting, which we you know, had started talking about a good couple of years ago. Well, there's nothing stopping us doing that, because you can do group calls and things like that as well. It doesn't just have to be video. So I thought it was, Nathan was talking to me about that today. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. And then if employees are sending messages out with the kind of usual working hours, because maybe they're working earlier in the day because they've got some sort of commitments later on, or they're working into the night because that suits them, maybe just encouraging people to put some sort of small message maybe in their email to say, whilst I may be working now, you are not expected to reply until your usual working hours. Just having that one line in there can totally take away a lot of the stress that the recipient might feel. It might be that they see it into the evening hours and feel like, oh, I should respond. Or they might see it the next day, see the time it was sent, and feel like that means that they need to then work into the evening as well. So it's really just about having simple tips like that and encouraging people to use them. And whilst communicating working hours to employees, there's also that point of, if there's people working at home as well in other rooms or the same room in the house, just communicating hours to them. So there's some form of agreement there about, okay, this is when I'm going to be working. Please don't distract me during that time, and just setting that boundary. So I promise we're coming to the end of the tips. I can see what time it is. So here's a few more. So particularly utilising the technology that's available to manage workloads, and there's all sorts of free and some paid for options, but using Outlook, Tasks, ClickUp, 15.5, Asana, and encouraging employees to block out time in their calendar between meetings. So we mentioned before that it can be too easy to put in back-to-back meetings, but encouraging people to put in times between those meetings to do focused work, because if they can get the focused work and tasks done during the working day, then hopefully they can avoid having to work in the evenings, because it can happen quite often where you have that day with back-to-back meetings, you get to the end of the day, you feel like, I haven't done what I needed to get done, so I'll just need to do it now to get it done for the next day. So if they have that focused time blocked in, then that might allow them to have a bit of a better work-life balance.
I think it's really important to remind people that meetings are tasks. So, you know, if they fill up their diary back to back, they're not giving themselves any time to do other tasks as well. So utilising those tools that are there, and, you know, do people actually understand how to use their Outlook calendar for that? For example, you know, colour coding things, categorising it, actually blocking it out, because most people are able to see a free or a busy in someone's calendars. And if they've planned stuff in, it's much easier to reject a meeting because they are actually busy, because they know they've got some stuff done. So it's just encouraging that work smart as well. And you know, some of that technology that's there on the slide is free. So Asana, Trello, these kind of things can be really helpful for people to kind of see what's on their workload and be able to kind of manage that as well.
And talking of putting time in between meetings, just this week, Michelle shared some learning with me that you can drag an email to the calendar icon in Outlook, and then you can make an appointment straight into your calendar for when you might do work associated with that email, which is genius, which I've been using this week. So thank you, Michelle.
Oh, well done. Alice's mind was blown. I was like, do you not know that?
I didn't know that. A lot of people may know that, but I didn't know that. And then conducting sessions and kind of drop-in sessions, maybe IT sessions, technology, how to use all the different functionalities, what might be useful for people, run sessions on work-life balance. People can come and share their good practice that they know of and really learn from each other. And it could be, you know, something as simple as providing a bit of template text for what goes in the email signature or out of office reply for putting your days and hours here, and then they can just pop that onto their signature or out of office to set that expectation of working hours. We touched upon the breaks and having non-meeting time. Improve productivity with document collaboration software and interactive communication tools, things such as Box, and there's lots of other software available as well. But if it can be more productive and interactive, then people will feel less pressure to work during non-working hours. And really encouraging employees to share plans and stay focused. Distractions can be really detrimental to focused work. I think I'd read somewhere before that if you're doing focused work and an email pings in and you look at the email, then it can take something like an average of 23 minutes to get back into that focused task of what was being done. And then I just got one final slide. So just in summary, these are some tips that we would encourage you to maybe take on board or take forward. So providing guidance to your workforce on how to positively manage the technology available to them, particularly in relation to work-life balance, and encourage them to create and maintain an effective and personalised work-life balance that really works for them, but with the understanding that it's not something that will just stay static, it's something that can change, and really important for them to understand the different options available. And then overall, just promoting a culture of positive work-life balance. And as part of this, really encouraging that role modeling behaviour, because if they see that senior people are maybe putting something in their email signature or putting something in their out of office about their working hours, then they might feel like, oh, if they're doing it, then it's okay for me to do it. So that's 3 kind of main recommendations in summary.
So thank you so much. I'm conscious of the time. There's a couple of other great things that have come in through the chat box. So thanks very much, everybody, for sharing their stories. So the walk and talk meetings has got a reaction as well, which is lovely. So they're kind of popular and people love that idea. Sarah has a 15-minute daily meeting with our team, purely social, to replace the chat you would normally have in the canteen while making a cuppa. Love that. I've kind of responded to that saying, you know, make sure that you guys share these kind of stories with people, because they're great ideas, but if people don't know them and they haven't thought about them themselves, they might not even know that they exist or that they're an option. Abby said that at the moment people are ignoring blocked out time and putting in clashing meetings back to back. I think what I would counter with that is, well, more fool them, reject the invite. You know, at the end of the day, you're in control of your workload. So, you know, if you have something that's quite important to you and that you need to do, then, you know, go back to people and say, I'm sorry, I can't do that time. I've got other things on. Can you look at another time? I'm available then. It's about not being a slave to other people. And I know that can be difficult depending on who it is and what the situation is, but it's understanding you are in control as well. So, you know, don't be frightened to have conversations with people about that as well. There is functionality on Outlook as well for to-do lists, and it kind of ties in with your calendar slots and things. It's really great technology. So Abby, you've shared that as well. Mo, you were talking about an example of when Do Not Disturb was on Teams and you still had calls coming through. you're never going to be able to stop that, but you can actually, in your settings on Teams, if your do not disturb is on, you get no calls, and you can do the same in Zoom. So it will actually divert it directly to a voicemail or ping a message back to say that you're not available. So that's the real importance of understanding the settings. Sarah's shared the To-Do tool on Microsoft is brilliant for managing workload and tasks. It's also linked to Outlook, and you can get a lot of satisfaction from the bing when you tick off a completed one. And Abby and I definitely both love the ticking off the task. It gives you that kind of great feeling. And it actually, it is great to kind of tick them off as they're going. And I use and I've shared with Alice previously, the eat the frog principles. So actually having your morning, the start of your day, where you eat your frog, that one big task that needs to be done that day, because that actually gives you positive energy to then go on and do the rest of the stuff during the day, and it gives you much more of a high. Whereas if you procrastinate over it and you do all the things, that'll take a minute, or whatever, and then half your day's gone and you're like, oh man, and then you're having to muster up the energy. So don't kind of underestimate that as well. And so Abby, yeah, I get that. So with us, the meeting will go ahead and you won't be there, actions galore. Kind of get that, but again, we will never be able to stop that, but we can actually have really good conversations with people that said, no, I wasn't there, so I'm not having that action, or actually the deadline you put on that doesn't work for me. And just have the courage to have those expectation conversations as well. So we're kind of finished, and there's lots of stuff coming through the chat. Why don't you guys come off mute and actually talk to us? That would be lovely. I'm sure you're all sick of the sound of my voice. And Mauve, I know you've put one in there as well just now. Do you want to kind of share that with us about your virtual kitchen?
Well, I have a very husky voice just now.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm not sure you wanted to listen because I got a sore throat. So just like Sarah said, it replaced the actual chats we had in the kitchen at work, where you just pop in for coffee or tea and you got cakes just lying about. And there was this need for human interaction. And that's why we thought about putting together a virtual kitchen on a Friday, and it's open between 2 to 4, and it's a drop-in session. So there is no pressure to join in if you're not, feeling up to it. But if you're free, then you can come in, and it's been great. We actually started in my little team, and we've opened it up to the wider office.
No, well done. I think, never underestimate that. I mean, I think it's really important that people look after themselves and work as well, because they'll actually be productive. We've done a similar thing. We've talked about the drop-in, and actually we haven't seen any drop in productivity. And in actual fact, our productivity has increased, not because of the drop-in,
definitely,
because of a lot of the other stuff. But it doesn't take people away from what they do. It gives them the choice to connect with people, which again can tap into their energy, help them feel better, and actually give them another boost of energy. And they produce more anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
We've had Zoom social meetings, and they've been an absolute disaster, because you end up sitting looking at all these faces and nobody speaks, or everybody speaks together. So are there any rules for big Zoom social work gatherings that you would recommend?
Well, I think the interesting thing about Zoom gatherings is that they do need a little bit of a facilitator. So certainly when we've been doing them, we haven't necessarily communicated the rules in advance, because it feels a little bit formal, but it's when people then join. And if you start to get more than that, then it's actually someone coming in. So when I've been doing them, I've kind of come in and said, hold on, remember we're on Zoom, one person talk at a time, even setting out how to use some of the functionality as well. So how to use the hands up or the reaction, the chat box. So you'll see tonight here, Alice and I are both here together, so we've both had our roles. So whilst we've been talking to you, I've been monitoring the chat, Judith's been there to help us with that as well, so that we can help with that, obviously using the mute function. So it's just about housekeeping. So if you think back to meetings that you would have in your own organisation, you would have the same challenges, right? But you would be in person, so you'd be saying, hold on a minute, that person's talking or whatever. Same rules apply in a virtual environment. we work ourselves up to feeling like it's different, and it's not. But actually the virtual environment has those additional tools that you can actually use and function as well. So it's just about setting out some housekeeping at the beginning, particularly if it becomes a bigger group. Remember, let's be respectful to each other, guys. You know, not everybody talking at once. Let everybody have their space. If there is something that you want to use your hands up, use the chat. We'll get to you. You'll have your time, and just be really, really clear about it, but informal at the same time, if that makes sense. Does that help?
Yeah, that's quite helpful. Yeah, thank you.
There was something that I saw in a training session a few weeks ago, which was about connecting remote teams, and they were saying when there's kind of one of these open forum calls, it can sometimes end up that nobody really says much because they don't really know what to say. And one of their tips was to have a different theme for each of the sessions. So you might have somebody who, like Michelle's mentioned, might be a facilitator that would decide to lead on a theme. And they were saying it could be anything. It could be about people's favorite films. It could be about recipes. It could be about how do people share their tips for working at home. It could be something like that. And then by having a bit more of a focus to it, it can kind of help the discussion to move forward a bit, and people might come to it with more of an idea of what they might say, and it might get more people involved in the discussion than if there were just 2 or 3 people, because that can happen sometimes when you end up with 2 or 3 people having all the chat and then other people are just kind of watching from the sidelines.
It's a really good point, because I was really nervous the first time we did one of our drop-ins, and I'll be honest, I didn't come up with the idea. I stole it from someone in my Twitter network, and they had kind of posted, and I thought, oh man, that's an amazing idea. So I got in touch with them and said, tell me a bit more about that. And she said, I just go in with some things, some key questions in case nobody wants to talk. She said, you know, things like, what are you watching on TV? What's the kind of the big things that I should be looking out for? What kind of hobbies do you have that are helping you pass the time? How are you connecting with family? Is there any good hints and tips? And actually that, for us, really got some conversation going. What I then did on the back of some of them was, we've got Workplace by Facebook, our social platform. So I would kind of thank people for coming and say, the big chat this week has been around this, and this is the thing to watch on the telly, and just sharing those kind of things. So sometimes we might only have 2 people, other times we might have had 12, other times we might have had more or less. Didn't really matter. What mattered is that people engaged, and we just shared that out with people, and that got a little bit of momentum as well. So, you know, share the stories and share the love, and more people will engage as well. Any other questions or insights or thoughts?
There's just one thing that's been on my mind. People tend to look at me like I've got 2 heads when I say things like, no, I don't check my emails at the weekend. And there's that kind of awkward silence. Like, they're like, really? I mean, like, is your employer okay with that? But it always shocks me. A lot of people that I would observe from the outside to have a really good work-life balance, or to be really on top of that kind of stuff, they're often quite like, but like, not at all. No, because I won't sleep well if I get an email that just makes me raging before I go to bed. So why would I look at them? All my notifications are off on everything, and they have been for a long time. And we give that guidance to people. You know, you will get interrupted, and that's not what you want. But like I say, even like my senior colleagues who are saying we are role modeling this awesome behavior, look at me like, really? You don't check? I'm like, no, because if something really bad happens, you'll phone me and I will know, and that'll be fine. And I don't mind, you can phone me, it's absolutely no problem. But it's amazing how much stuff isn't important enough to get a phone call. You can sort of be like, she's crazy.
But I think there's a flip on that on the head as well. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. But what you're doing there is you're actually sharing, coaching, and educating people. And you could go a step further and go, no, absolutely don't check my email, because I value my home time and I really want to rest because I want to be at my best at work tomorrow. If I check my email, I don't sleep at night, then I'm not working at my best, and that's not good for anybody.
Exactly.
You know, you should try it, you know, and actually take it that step further and actually go, well,
absolutely.
I mean, because of.
Yeah, I'm comfortable doing it, but like you say, people are sort of like, wow, she's going to get sacked soon. That's a shame. But there is that bit around the role modeling of it, and it has to be genuine, because if it doesn't happen, like we had a long chat at SLT about how important it was to do that, and unfortunately that night our chief exec sent an email out of our finance director, who had wholeheartedly taken on what they were saying and had put their lunch breaks in their diary and was like, I'm going to do this, then they're like, but you've just totally undermined that for me, and now I don't feel like that whole chat was actually what you meant.
Do you know, and
so
I think this is where the
little things can be so
I
subtle.
think this is where the power of our roles in organisations can be. So I guess I'm in a privileged position because I sit on the board and I work with the CEO, the CFO, that sort of thing, and I have got no qualms about giving them feedback and calling them out for bad behaviour, and I invite them to do the same with me. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and we have to be the voice of the organisation. We have to give those senior people feedback. We have to enable that voice in some way, and I know it really depends on your position in the organisation where you kind of sit, but you can role model yourself, you can share those stories, you can connect people, you can take what you know about your organisation and feed it up the chain down and likewise and really start a revolution, because I think all too often we spend a lot of time worrying about those that are not that are resisting or who are not not conforming or are actually setting a bad example, rather than shining a light on those that are setting a good example. You know, look at this person. So look at Abby, she's there doing this, and her outputs and her productivity are fantastic. You know, there's nothing that she's losing, yet she's got great behaviours, she's happier, she's sleeping at night. You know, it's those kind of things. It's actually like, oh, you know, look at that, they're doing that, so I must do that. We spend all of our energy there. Why don't we just ignore that? Because that's their choices at the moment, and shine a light on the people that are doing the really good things and actually share some of them and see how many other people join that revolution. It's like that video, I don't know if you remember it, where the guy in the sand is dancing on his own and everybody's looking at him going, holy God, and then all of a sudden someone else thinks I want a bit of that, and they come up, and then actually it turns twofold, and everybody's having a party on the beach and there's only a few on the outskirts. So it's just thinking a little bit differently. And I'm conscious that we've been talking for a while now, and we're kind of 15 minutes over. So Judith, I'll hand back to you. We will absolutely share the slides, so don't worry. And I know there's a recording here, and Alice and I are both on LinkedIn, and I'm sure we are happy for our contact details to be shared. So if there's anything more or any other questions or any connections that we can do, we're more than happy to do that.
That's super. Thank you very much. I mean, it has been really, really interesting. I think everybody will have learned something tonight. I'm going to go away and look at this, dragging your email into your diary, but I didn't know about that.
Game changer. If you want me to show you later on, let me know, Judith.
I'm going to do it tomorrow morning because I'm not going into my work emails tonight, but I will have a go at it. If I don't figure it out, I will come back to you. So thank you for that. But
no problem.
Really great tips and techniques that we can all take on board, and even those of us that thought we were quite good at it, you know, there's always something you can learn, which is what I love about these sessions. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate you giving up your time. I really appreciate the people who have turned up tonight. I appreciate it's at the end of the day, and you've probably all been staring at your screen all day. But I hope you find
the irony is not lost that this is on work-life balance and we're doing this out of hours. So thank you for making the choice to join us. We appreciate it. But thank you to those that made the choice to sign up and want the recording. Even better for them.
Well, yeah, because what we do is we send the recording to the people that turn up, because I think that's the fair thing to do. And unless somebody says at the last minute, I'm really sorry, something's come up, then fair enough. But thank you both. We really appreciate the support that we get in the branch from external speakers. And it's been an hour and a quarter well invested tonight. So thank you.
I hope so. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And thanks to Alice. In fairness, Alice did the legwork, most of the legwork on this, and that's where our organisation is a really unique one, because we do all of that research and we just come up with the solutions and share the practical stuff that, you know, folks like me and you guys, we just want to know what is it that we can do, what are the ideas, rather than, you know, doing all of the research. So thank you, Alice. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
I say really appreciate it. What I would ask from all the attendees is if you could just take 2 minutes, you'll get a Survey Monkey. It's probably already come through to you, asking you for some feedback. We really appreciate if you would do that. But thanks so much. Lovely to see you tonight. And I wish you good luck in striking a decent work-life balance.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Bye now.
Bye, everyone.